Just a few seconds before we get started here. All right, I got 7 o'clock. Let's get this meeting called to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Yes, roll call is on the agenda as well.
Chairman Beglin,
Here.
Trustee Frank. Here. President Lenz.
Here. All right, present. Public comment from anybody in the audience, anything that's not on the agenda? Going once, twice, sold. All right. Next would be consent agenda to approve the minutes of the July 17th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Got a motion?
Second.
A second, all in favor? Aye. Motion passed. That brings us to presentations. I think Chris has a nice presentation of the draft 2026 annual operating budget for us.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. And I'll start off with thank yous. This document that you look at is not just made up by me in a corner. Believe it or not, it does take a lot of work from our department heads and their crews as well. So huge shout out to all of them. It's also the first budget with our new Treasurer Upson here, who added a lot of value this round as well. So I want to thank her for that. So for those who haven't been through this process before, this is like the nitty gritty meeting. This is where we look through the budget in a sense, line item by line item. I'll try to go over it high level, but this is your opportunity to ask questions and critique and make adjustments as you see fit. Before it turns into a book format and then presented to the village board in a few weeks. So the way that we look at this is we go through, I did print it off for 2 of you. I know Trustee Beglin has it electronically. Just the documents that start with the general fund. We're going to go fund by fund and then starting with revenues and then expenses. And feel free to stop me whenever you like. So the first section is our tax income. So this is our property tax levy. Reminder that the tax levy is not a number we make up. It is determined by the state calculations with levy limits, and we can only go up based off of net new construction. So as I told the village board at our last meeting, we went up a whopping $2,000 because of net new construction, which we're really thrilled about. And that's what you see reflected here. It's such a change that it didn't even change in percentages. It still shows 100. So we're virtually having no increase in the property tax levy. The tax equivalent from sewer and water stays the same. Forest crop tax stays the same. And so we virtually have no change in general property tax. One thing I did want to note is that the value of the village did go up. We saw value with a couple of the improvements that were done in homes throughout the village, including Dollar General and a little bit that Port Washington was able to get done. But a big section of it is the Hillcrest lots. So for those who don't know, those are recategorized, at least a majority of them, into residential zone or residential values instead of the agricultural, which kicked up our overall value. So when we're collecting the same amount of money, but the value of the village goes up, that means the mill rate that we tax that goes down. And so we're estimating, and I'll say that it's a word here, estimate, that the mill rate should go down from $5.08 that it was last year to $4.69 that we're proposing for this year. So that's important information for you all to know. Moving on to special assessments. We don't plan on doing any special assessments at this time. Go on intergovernmental revenues. So these are the dollars that we get in state aid. The 2 numbers that kicked up are state shared revenues with the passage of Act 12. There's now a built-in increase based off of the Wisconsin sales tax. So when Wisconsin collects more sales tax dollars, we get more in our shared revenues. So that's the 3% increase you see there. And then the other number that went up is the local transportation aid. That is based off of a 6-year formula from DOT, and it's based on how much money you're spending on roads. So we obviously have been spending more on roads lately, thus the amount of money in state aid that we get increases. So that's the 50% increase there. All of the other state aid revenues remain the same. Next is licenses and permits. You don't see too much fluctuation here. Most of them are just corrected to actuals. The only change is the construction and building. Again, 20,000 is still a pretty high number, but we're just trying to be more realistic on what those incomes are going to be, primarily from the industrial park getting built. And so you see an overall 70% decrease in licenses and permits. We go to the next page. Fines and forfeitures does not change very much. So then we get into the miscellaneous category. So this starts off with town reimbursement. So one of the changes that Treasurer Upson had put into place was how we net out our maintenance and different items that we do with the township. So before, what we were doing is we were taking on all of the expenses of the maintenance and then offsetting on the revenue side by getting all of the revenues from the township. And so you saw, again, that higher number, 42,000, was helping to offset that. Now those are both kind of off the books and taken care of so that they wash out. And all that you're seeing here is the reimbursement for my contract is what's reflected there. Next up is on interest. We continue to have a lot invested in our local government investment pool, but with rates going down, we presume that means we're going to earn a little bit less on our interest. This is probably a pretty conservative amount. If I were to have a crystal ball, I would hope that we get 65,000, if not more, in interest, but we just wanted to have a conservative number in there. The rest of the numbers don't really change until we get to recreational revenues. One of the things that have kind of gone up and down this year is our relationship with the Friends of Fredonia Parks and Rec. They've been able to help us with a lot of things, but they're not 100% sure how much and what they can commit to in 2026. So we're just going to go into 2026 planning that the fundraising dollars are going to go through us, and so will the expenses. And anywhere that they can offset and help out, then obviously that'll decrease the income side and the revenues and the expenses on the other side. And then, so all in total, we have net general fund revenues, 1,751,000, which is 1% lower than we had the year before. Any questions on the revenue side? Rick, I see you thinking. You good?
Just doing math.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, we'll move on to the expense side here. So first category is general government. It is just that. It's all of our general government expenses. So you see costs for village board wages, our association fees, village board expenses, our legal fees. We kick that up a little bit just because we do rely on our attorney a little bit more than usual. Plus, the more that we do our ordinance codification, that's probably the most time consuming for our attorney. And we want to make sure we recognize that we have to spend some money in order to do that. Engineering services remain the same. Village president doesn't change. Sorry, Pete. The admin clerk and treasurer wages are just a 2% increase there. Audit and bookkeeping. This is one of the areas that, again, having a smart lady like Treasurer Upson here is benefiting us. So we took our new auditing contract with CLA and we broke that up amongst the funds. And this 12,450 assumes that there's like no corrections that our auditors are going to need to make. So that's a high bar for Julie to set for herself, but she's pretty confident that she can go in doing that. Right?
Yeah.
You got it. All right.
It's going to be perfect for keeping us on the straight and narrow. So.
Exactly. You got it. Little bump up for the mileage of clothing, and then get our normal payroll stuff. I'll skip on down to elections. So obviously next year is a 4-election year. Every other year, our election expenses ebb and flow. And so this will be a more expensive year with the 4 elections that we have going on. Our assessor contract, you guys renewed that not too long ago. We're up for a new 3-year contract, and this is the amount just for the general assessing services. That's the $8,100. You see our hall costs for electric, phone, water, gas. Again, those are decreased because that's separate from the balance sheet that you see here. Hall maintenance was kicked up. We just had a FGCC meeting where they approved some maintenance items here in the hall, including a resealing of the parking lot outside. And so that's why you see that increased there. Technology and equipment are brought to actuals. Municipal insurance, that's another savings that we were able to capture with the new insurance that we have. You'll see that kind of throughout all the funds that has decreased, which is great news for us. And then finishing up general government, it's the same thing with workers' comp. We get the benefit of that new provider. And so overall, our general government costs decreased by about 1%. Next is public safety. This is primarily the marshal's office. You'll notice that his budget really doesn't change very much outside of marshal supplies and expenses. So if you remember, originally he was planning on purchasing body cameras this year. With the lawsuit that happened with the weapons, he had to push that aside, get the weapons instead. And now his body cameras are set for next year. And that's what you see stuffed into the supplies and expenses. Other than that, there isn't too much to note. Inspection, that's our actual inspection services for residential commercial. We kicked that up a little bit with our new contractor that we have, Jeremy Pfeiffer. I imagine he's going to want a little bit more money for his work than good old John Derler was doing and our previous inspectors. Plus, we anticipate he's going to do a little bit more work too with our industrial park. So overall, public safety just goes up by 1%. Next is public works. And I'll quickly note that everything that you see in blue here is a payroll number that correlates to a formula that Julie has in her sheets. But one of the things that we do with our DPW guys, they have a massive timesheet where they allot their time based off of what they're doing. So if they're working on the road, then they'll say, I spent 4 hours on the road. If they work in parks, then they'll say, I spent 5 hours working in parks. And so every time they do that, that notation goes into how we process the payroll, and then it's split into those various payroll categories. So the way we determine how that looks here is we take the previous year's percentage of time worked, take the new value of how much all of their employment costs, and then split that up based off those percentages. So when you see highway equipment wages being at $30,319, it's because we anticipate a lot of work happening on our roads next year, and with our guys doing it themselves. So hopefully that explains the uptick there. Equipment maintenance, that's one of Eric's favorite line items, where if anything ever breaks or it needs to get repaired, then we use that line item. You'll notice that in previous years, it was much higher. This year was much higher. And he was brought down to 20,000. The goal here is that as we get new things, which we are, and we continue to replace things with newer models, we hope and pray that there'll be less, repairs and things like that we need to do. And so that's why you see that brought down to 20,000. And Eric did feel that was a reasonable number.
I'm just shocked to see a DPW number go down.
Me too, Rick. Me too. Speaking of going down, our equipment replacement for small capital also goes down a little bit. That's for things like tools and stuff like that they might need to buy. Let's see here. Most of these other numbers stay the same. You see the shop gas just goes down to meet actuals. If we skip on to the next page, most of these numbers are just payroll numbers going up and down based off their actuals. I do want to pause at street maintenance. So this is a line item that, and I'm sure Trustee Beglin remembers when I first came on, this wasn't a thing. Like that's not how you were budgeting your streets. And we were determined to kind of squirrel away some money each year for things like cold patching and seal cracking and things like that. And so we've been building up this amount of money each year. And now that we're on track, I'd like to see this increase by about 5% each year. And so that's what you're seeing happen here for the first time. So this year we had budgeted 50. And then next year we're at 52.5. The year after that will be 5% on top of that. Let's see, moving down here, snow and salt will increase a little bit with our planned purchases. There was something else you were going to get with the salt money. You remember? The brine tank. Yep. So purchasing the brine tank with cash, which we'll get to a little bit later in the CIP, is one of the things he was able to do with that uptick of money. Our garbage recycling contract goes up by about 4% each year. So that is standard. And then finally, it rounds out with the rest of the payroll items for DPW. So overall, Public Works increases by about 7%. Then we move into Parks. As long as I've been here, the board and the finance committee have continued to push parks as something that we want to invest in. And so we've continued that commitment, whether it's through wages or just general parks maintenance. I understand that that's a priority for the village. And so you see that reflected here. We still have a lot of staff time spent in our parks. We have the parks repair and maintenance line item going up by about 7%, and then followed by the rest of the payroll wages. One of the things I wanted to point out with our newest hire, Simon, he took it upon himself to budget out the dollars that were going to be allocated next year. He's going to be allocated, and to create a one-year parks plan and how he would spend that money in each of the parks. And we just reviewed it earlier this week. We were very impressed. We planned on whatever Parks and Rec meets next, he'll review that with them as well. And then that'll set us off on a good step forward as we hit 2026 for the ways that we're going to be updating our parks. So shout out to Simon. As you flip the page, you see the expense side of the village events. So again, if we're going to take on the encumbrance of the events, well, then we have to offset that expense. Moving on to economic development, we just put that down a little bit just because we rarely use that item. It's more for marketing and things like that when we need to do it. And then we get into the important numbers, which are our fund transfers. So anytime that you see a fund transfer, it's us moving dollars from the general fund to help do something else. So I'm actually going to start with the bottom here. So the paramedic stipend. So as you all remember, we increased the levy for the paramedic stipend in order to fund the paramedic program. We moved that money over this year in anticipation that we would need the money this year. Our grant dollars have allowed us to move through a majority of this year without the need to spend that money. And so now we're left with a fund balance in our paramedic fund that we can carry over to the next year to spend that. And so you can see that in the 2025 9-month, the 189,800, that's how much money we put into that fund for the paramedic program. It only is going to need about 190, I believe, to balance out the full next year and a couple dollars that are left over from this year. And so again, we're able to pay that off already with the money we've already squirreled away, so we don't have to move additional dollars over this year. And you'll see the benefit of that in just a second. The fire stipend is the amount that the general fund pays the fire department in order to balance that fund. Capital projects is the amount of cash on hand dollars that we transfer to the CIP fund in order to pay for cash on hand capital projects. And then finally, our contingency fund is how much that we squirrel away for a rainy day. And so if you remember from our audit, one of the feedback that we got was you need to increase your general fund reserve balance. So you could see that we're already doing that this year. At the beginning of the year, we put 50,000 away. At the end of this year, we're going to evaluate to see how much revenues over expenses that we're at and squirrel away the rest of those dollars into our general fund, which I'm estimating is about another 100K. And then on top of that, in 2026, of the 181 that you see here, 100 of that would go towards our general fund reserves. And then the 81 would go to the fire CIP fund for most likely a future ambulance purchase. And so again, we've talked about the need for a vehicle. The ambulance is next up here. We keep squirreling away money for that. That is what I would recommend we do with that extra money. So kind of high level way to look at it is, yes, we're not paying for the paramedic program this year, but instead we're taking that money to cover our ambulance. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on the general fund? That's the longest one. So if you can get through that, then we're golden. Okay. Next is our capital projects fund. You guys have reviewed this at the last meeting and then recommended to the village board to approve. We did make 2 changes since you've last seen it, but they're removing things changes, not adding things. So I'm assuming that you agree with that. And we'll review that quick. So one of the things that we removed was the brine tank. So I mentioned that earlier. Eric was able to find one that we could purchase with cash on hand using the general fund instead of using our CIP dollars. So we just completely removed that from the CIP, that cash on hand. And then we switched around 2 items. In the borrowed side, we did have the brush chipper for 50,000. And then on the cash side, we had the municipal parking lot and Stony Creek at 62,000. We switched those around, one, because the 62,000 is more money. That's if we're going to borrow, we should borrow for the larger amount. And two, the 50,000 was able to get split to cover two items. And Eric can tell you more details if you'd like, but he found a brush chipper that we can get for only 30 instead of the 50 that we had. And then the dump trailer that you see there, that was actually planned for 2027. We were able to bring that over into 2026 to do with cash as well. So the benefit of doing that lowered our cash transfer to CIP, and then it grew the amount of money we're able to squirrel away in the general fund for our reserves. So it's kind of a win-win that way. So hopefully that all makes sense, but other than that, it's the same items that you've been seeing. And then in the budget itself, this is just a reflection of what this looks like and how we do it. So you see some interest income, you see the proceeds from our debt, and then the general fund cash transfer. One thing I'll note about the debt is that in 2027, we don't plan on borrowing for anything else besides the wastewater treatment plant. So really the borrowing that you do for 2026 and 2027 is all the borrowing that we're going to be doing. And so it won't have as significant of an impact on the tax roll. I will say that this, now that we've gotten this number down small enough, it's starting to get to the point where we probably won't go out to the bond market. I'll check with Todd, our financial advisor, but there's cost to doing that. And so if we don't have to, and we can just go through like the state trust fund, then we don't have to pay the fees of going out to bond and still get a relatively competitive rate. On the expense side, you just see our items themselves, how they're broken up into the expense line items, and then how we pay that out. So any questions on CIP stuff? Okay, next is our debt fund. So our debt fund is pretty simple. It's our general obligation debt. Any principal interest payments that we need to pay on general obligation debt runs through this fund. Last year, the number is a little deceiving on here. It was pretty close to the 260 that we see here, except that we paid off a loan as well. So we had additional fund balance that we used to pay down. And so this year just reverts back to the 260 number, and that's roughly what it is each year. So that's the amount that we lay onto the tax roll, is just that 260 portion. Remember, any debt that's up for a utility stays with the utility. This is just our general fund debt. Any questions on that? All right. Next up is the fire department, and the chief is here if you'd like to ask him any tough questions. On the revenue side, our fire dues virtually stay the same. They fluctuate up and down by about $1,000 each year, but that's what we're proposing. The Wabaka contract, I won't get into too much because that's actually a discussion item for later on in the budget, but you see we estimated a 3% increase there. Miscellaneous revenues. So one of the takeaways we got from our new auditor and working with our new treasurer here is the importance of having a clean fund balance. And so while it's important for the general fund to have a fund balance for us to use for a rainy day, all of our individual funds really should be at zero at the end of each year, right? They should zero out, and then the difference, either we catch up to correct ourselves, fill that fund balance, or we allocate that somewhere else, right? And so what we found is that the fire department is actually sitting on a little bit of a fund balance that needs to get spent down. And one of the suggestions that the fire chief had, which we really liked, was we have a pumper truck lease that we still have 3 years on. Why not pay that off, right? And get that off of our backs. It does two things. One, it lessens the burden on the fire department. And two, when we inevitably go out to bond for an ambulance or a fire engine one day, we have that breathing room to do that. So that was a good suggestion. And so that's what that 202,171 is supposed to represent. It's that spend down of that fund balance. And you'll see the same thing on the expense side as well. If you continue on, we have a little bit more of interest that we're generating, our normal contracts, and then our billing service income, the 200,000 there. And then again, that transfer from the general fund that you saw before. On the expense side, I'll give the chief a lot of credit. I challenge him, just like I do Eric. I feel like they go back and forth on trying to not spend as much as the year before. And he made a lot of concessions this year, which I appreciate. So we obviously still have maintenance on trucks. We've got a lot of vehicles that need various maintenance items. Same thing with equipment and repair maintenance. Our building maintenance, this is the 1 in 5 years, I believe, for the sprinkler system that's going to increase our expenses for next year. You see a slight decrease in fuel. That's just because it's split between another fuel item that you'll see later on. The rest of the stuff was just balanced to actuals. Our insurance accurately represents now the insurance costs for the fire department. Same thing with water, sewer, electric, office supplies. Uniforms, there's an uptick in uniforms because there's more of the turnout gear that needs to get purchased for them. You see a slight decrease in volunteer wages, primarily due to paramedics going on calls more often, and thus the volunteer calls will go down a little bit. Moving on, you see our normal LOSA contribution, normal small equipment. I'm just going to look through here, see if there's anything major to point out. If you just want to go down to the capital pumper truck lease, that's where you see us paying that off, that pumper truck. And then the rest is just the balance of the utilities and ambulance costs as well. And so overall, his expense side increases by 23%, but again, a majority of that is offset by the spend out of the fund balance on the revenue side. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions for the chief?
So obviously there's a giant percentage increase in insurance, new
Yeah.
hires.
I think you have broken it out a little bit more now with insurance cover what's supposed to be for the fire department, right?
So,
yeah.
Yeah, because we've got actual information and, yeah, what the vehicles, the buildings and all that, so we've actually got it split accurate.
Okay.
So legit number now versus just the.
I guess.
Just a swag. Okay.
Yep.
And any of these, I see a lot of green here, which congratulations, good job. Eric could probably take a lesson from you.
Oh, Eric.
Every year he
But,
goes through this.
Did any of that hurt? I mean, seriously hurt?
No, it just made me look, I mean, last year I thought that I did a detailed job, because I really pretty much started from zero. Added every dollar that I think I would spend, just maybe look at it a little bit differently. You know, we talk about, we're talking right now about getting rid of an engine down there possibly, which I can save some costs on, right, because the maintenance costs. Just wait for that ISO report to come back, once that gets back, and we make a decision of getting rid of an engine down there, which saves us maybe $6,000-7,000 on our maintenance costs, which allows us to let that down.
I just don't want to be shortchanging our firefighters at all.
No, I think everything else.
And I think you've got it truly broken out as fire and paramedic.
Yeah, we have fire, ambulance, and then we've got.
Okay.
Yep.
Getting that money, so that Chris getting that off the other back, it's always on there. $60,000, cash, and just for that. Say this operation next year will give us 2027, will give us $60,000. Not for the party, I'm just. Not sure if that was a smart move when we did that, I don't know, I mean, it's just something to think about for the future coming up. How do you finance something, whether it's a piece like we did that way or give.
Yeah.
I think at the time, it's what we needed to do.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering the situation correctly.
Yeah,
It was-
we had a big loan for the firehouse, we had, I think, Main Street still being paid off.
Yeah.
A lot of things.
All right.
All right. Next up is the paramedic budget. So one caveat here, not that you guys can't change it, but I prefer if you did it because this has already gone through the joint committee for review, and then they recommended to all the municipalities to approve. So we'd appreciate if you do as well. But on the revenue side, you see intergovernmental revenues, that's just everybody's portions getting paid into the fund, all four participating municipalities. 36,000 is how much we estimate for the billing revenues just to get split out into the paramedic fund. You see our personal interest on our money is the 8,000. You see everybody, the rest of the fund's interest is the 12,000. And then a little bit of a spend down of fund balance there, making the 501,610. And then on the expense side, just very high level, the biggest change here is hiring a new full-time paramedic. So with the cost of doing that, that bumps up like the wages and the WRS and health insurance. So that's the biggest change. Other than that, you see some of our smaller expenses like uniforms, vehicle insurance go, closer to actuals now that it's not a brand new program or we're buying things for the first time. And if it's any help, I know that the joint committee did review where they were satisfied with it as well. I know the chairman of Eglin was there. So any questions on that?
And this means that the wages, you're fully staffed then, right? Because the plan is.
next year, 2026.
Okay, so this is going to be more realistic of what our current,
Moving forward, yeah.
moving forward is. Okay,
Is that prorated at all, or are you just figuring it being hired on January 1st and carrying? Nice.
Let's hope the money's there.
yeah, realistic, right?
All right. All righty, next is the TID. So what you're gonna see here is probably what the TID's gonna look like for the next, 12, 15, 16 years here. We're done with all of our major construction projects. The grading is done, road utilities, all that other good stuff. So now if you look on the expense side, you see it's pretty small, at least comparatively. And that's because all our really expenses is paying down debt and a little bit of auditing. And then the revenues to match that are our revenues for the local taxes that are generated off of those new developments. We get a little bit of personal property aid from the state. We earn interest on our investments. And then you'll start to see a spend down of fund balance. And again, that's just because we have so much money left over in that fund that we need to spend it down as well. And so overall, that's 380, 823 is going to be about roughly what our annual cost will be. And the more increment that's generated in the TID, then the more it'll get offset. And we just had a big meeting all about that. All right. Any questions before we get into the utilities? Okay, next up is the water utility. So again, both of our water and sewer utilities, they act as separate entities, separate businesses. They have to balance out in one way or another. So the water utility, you see the increase in our rates by 3%, as was approved by you all. The only thing that goes down is the industrial. It's the impact of Guy and O'Neill no longer functioning at full capacity, so we're recognizing that. If they have a new person go in there and they're pumping out a bunch of water, then great, then we'll see the benefit of that. Under interest, you see a big significant jump up there. Well, that's because by the end of the year, we're gonna have $1 million sitting in our capital improvement fund, and thus we'll be generating a good amount of interest. That's the same reason that you see under water tower rent, zero income, because we no longer have that annual income coming in. We have a little bit of miscellaneous income, and then you see the transfer in from the capital projects, and that totals 609,496. And then on the expense side, the first thing I want to point out is the contingency. So again, this is our kind of money we could squirrel away for a rainy day fund. I want to point that out because even with the 3% increase, even with 50,000 of interest coming in, we still only have as a utility about $7,000 that we can squirrel away for a rainy day. And that is not great. So we'll continue to look both on the expense side where we can save costs. And I would recommend that this board be cognizant of any inflationary increases that the PSC does allow, because that's what's going to help us to buffer this in the future. So we move on from that. You see our payroll items that get put into there. The power is adjusted for closer to actuals. Chemicals and our supplies in general continue to go up, so we're acknowledging that. Repairs, that's a tricky item. So whenever you see a water main break, like what just happened this week, we use that repair line item. You can see that as of when I ran this report, we were at $57,767. Eric, how much did you just charge to the? So there's a reason that we put money into this line item, and we'll probably need to continue to bump this up. Right now, this is absorbed, you know how many breaks we've had? this year?
6.
Is it 6?
I think it was 4 on north-south Milwaukee. And I'll just count the 2 on Washington on Monday.
Yeah.
Instead of the 4 that actually happened.
So just be cognizant that, we're still comfortable with this number being 70, but if you see it skyrocket one year, or if we need to eventually put more money into it, that's why.
Hopefully some of that will offset once we start doing some of our road
Yeah.
projects, right?
It-
And certainly has already,
Okay.
Didn't we just do Washington
Washington separate next year.
next year? Okay,
Wilson was done.
maybe that's what I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
Wilson crossed with Washington.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that'll be the big road
It's
project
gonna
next
be a
year is
never-ending
Washington.
thing, but hopefully focusing on some of the roads can alleviate.
Yeah.
Some of your pain.
It'd be nice.
Alrighty, if you go down contractual services, we've decreased that expense a little bit. Which is a whole other thing that I won't necessarily get into right now, but billing and accounting has matched actuals. And then the only other change here is you see the capital projects 140, that is the water portion of Washington. So that's us replacing that water main throughout that street. And then we pay off our normal debt, and that's it for water. Any questions on that? All right, next is our lab fund. So again, I'll just keep giving you the background. This was started up when Director Paulus came with us. We had some leftover ARPA dollars, and the board at the time decided to use those dollars to start up a water testing lab. This has grown to be more and more successful each year, which we're really proud of. And we're continuing to see the track record of that. So just when you look at our 9 months, we have about 35,000 in income right now, compared to the 28,000 in expenses. We're planning on ending the year with about 10,000 in additional revenues for that fund. And then next year, we just continue to see that growing. We have more contracts that Eric is locking up, which we appreciate, and that program will continue to grow. This is the one area, and Eric and I have had a lot of conversations about it, that when the day inevitably comes that we need another employee, be that either part-time or maybe full-time, this is where I can see them helping. One, because we need the help there. And 2, we have revenue in this fund to offset the person, right? So whether it's another Tessa like we had, or a part-time employee that can hold a certification license, just know that, yes, we're building up a fund balance here, but it'll most likely be expensed at one point or another in order to have a body there committed, to this operation. So hopefully that makes sense. But as of now, we're going to have about a $27,000 fund balance start to build up in that lab fund, which is, Rick remembers it's far away from the negative balance that I think we started off with the first year. So that's awesome to see. All right. And then last but not least is our sewer utility. We see an increase in revenues there with this body approving the 24.6% increase to rates. That's reflected there. We see a slight decrease in miscellaneous revenues, a slight increase in our interest that builds up with those additional revenues there. Our interest rate subsidy is always tied to the rate itself. And then finally, the use of debt funds, which again is for Washington. On the expense side, you see us saving for a rainy day with 85,000. This is the amount, by the way, that I mentioned when we talked about the wastewater treatment plant, that we could do more projects with cash, clearly. And this is us building up to be able to do that. So let's say the wastewater treatment plant gets upgraded in a couple of years here, and it's a great time for us to redo the driveway, or maybe we do want to add a garage on for the guys down there. This is the money that we're building up to be able to do that instead of borrowing. If you continue on, you see more actuals for the wages. The big jump there is Mike, and I believe, did we dedicate all of the intern in there too? Or is that all of our wages? I'm sorry, that's what I double check. Yes. Yeah, so most of that is Mike and then the intern or whatever role we fill in there is dollars getting moved all to sewer because that's where Mike spends most of his time. We see a slight increase to biosolids, solids disposals and chemicals. That's because prices keep going up for that stuff. A majority of the rest gets to stay the same as the previous year. Outside services is the one thing that we bumped up significantly. This is mainly for engineering costs. So even though we're not going to be building the wastewater treatment plant quite yet, we're still going to get charged engineering costs all throughout next year, and we need to be able to pay for that. So that's why you see the uptick there. And then the rest should just be budget actuals for our payroll with a little bit more in our capital projects for all of those fun things. And with that, you have made it through the 2026 budget. I will pause here for questions of anybody.
I don't have any further questions. How about you?
No. I'm just thinking water tower maintenance that we know in the back need to do, and is that something that we're gonna be? You know, creating a higher reserve or using. The water tower, we know that something that need to be repainted here in a few years.
So I'm sorry, could you ask that again about the water utility?
Have, you know, knowing that we haven't spent several $100,000.
Oh, the maintenance?
Yeah, maintenance. Because you were talking about the contingency reserve being so low that it's alarming.
Yeah.
So that's what crossed my mind is the maintenance that we're going to be required to do in about 5 years.
Yeah, unfortunately, water is the one fund where we really have little control on increasing our revenues. Even if we
Yeah.
wanted to, we'd have to perform a full rate study with the PSC. That costs money just to do that. And then even then, we'd have to prove ourselves out, and then they would tell us, okay, well, this is how much you're even allowed to increase based off of A, B, and C. I don't have the LGIP accounts right here in front of me, but I know that we have a decent amount in our reserves for the water utility right now. Remember off the top of your head?
Not enough.
You know,
It's never enough, but you're right. I mean, we're gonna get to those years where we're gonna have a lot of maintenance, and that specific year, we're gonna have to cut down on our other costs in order to pay for the water tower meetings.
I mean, I know the sale of the. With the interest earning on that will definitely help, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Yeah. So I mean, we're gonna have over $1 million. Granted, we don't want to spend that down. That's the
No.
point of doing this.
well, that's what I'm talking about, and
Yeah.
interest will actually
Yeah.
help,
Yep.
so we have less borrowing. To do that necessary to pay bills.
Should that be listed on there then for an expense, so we don't lose that
Which,
for the water tower maintenance?
well, that's part of your outside services too, or and water side. Because this next year isn't the big one. It's the big jump is in like 3 or 4 years.
I just wanna keep it in the back of our minds that.
Yep.
It's coming,
It's coming.
once we get the sewer to take care of it, we've got water tower maintenance.
Yeah.
They did clean the inside and clean the outside, so. They do a good job.
Does look nice.
All right. Is that it for questions? Pete? All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for your and Julie as well for putting all this together, and the heads of department for all the work that got put into this. Sounded like, I don't know. All right,
Recommendation.
so
Send it
that's
to the-
that's gonna be next. Items for action and or discussion. Discussion of possible recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees on the draft 2026 annual operating budget.
You need a motion?
Yeah, we do.
I'll make a motion to recommend the 2026 draft annual operating budget be presented to the Board of Trustees. I'll second the motion.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. Discussion and possible action on the 2026 to 2028 fire protection contract with Wabuca Fire Department. Who's taking that one, Brian?
Go ahead, give a summary.
Sure. So attached in your packet is the current contract that was submitted to Village of Vernonia for coverage of part of Wabuca, the town of Vernonia. Wabuca carries the contract for the entire town of Vernonia. And then they subcontract to Village of Vernonia to cover some sections that we're closer to. Those sections are on the east side of Highway 57, all up to KK. They go from Meadowlark all the way up to Jago. And then there is the Kendall Bissell property where you have the barn fire right across the high school. And then some land that is off of Meadowlark, but on the north side of Meadowlark, so. Bordered by the river in there, that is part of the town. So they contract us, for the coverage of fire and EMS in that area, so fire and ambulance. So they propose to provide us with the dollar amount, and it is a 1.5% increase each year annually that they are proposing. Little background on that, I went back and did the math, they have given us a 1.5% increase. All the way from 2020, I did not, was not able to find in 2017, it's a 3-year deal all the time. I was not able to find the 2017 contract, but I agree it's better than 1.5% increase just standing that they plans.
Does the amount that they provide cover for the costs or?
I don't know how you break that apart, but you know, in reference, fire apparatus, ambulances have increased 10% every single year since 2020. We're getting 1.5.
Right.
And what kind of percentage calls are you covering for that area?
Good question. I do provide them every year with a service area.
Because you know what your call volume is,
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
do
just
provide
curious
every
how
year
many.
with service area report. 2023 we had 10
Okay.
fire or car accidents, and then we had 13 EMS or ambulance calls back in 2020.
And that's going up approximately 10% every year.
Well, no, the cost of the equipment goes up 10%. This
Yeah.
stays pretty much the same every single
Okay.
year. Those are just the 2023 numbers that have the search.
You said 10 calls in the town
Yes,
in 2023.
10 calls in this contract period.
How many calls in the village? I mean, how many calls that were not part of that contract?
Oh, we do 50 calls total on the fire side of things.
Okay.
So 50 or, sorry.
About 60, yeah.
So the reason this is before you, normally if we were content with the contract, and then we would have just quickly thrown it in front of the full village board for approval, you guys would have stamped it, we would be good. But one of the things that I noticed was just the 1.5%, I would say, does not even keep up with inflation.
Right.
And at some point, we need to recognize that and have those conversations with Wabuca. I mean, you've talked about the contract with them in the past. Do you have opinions one way or another, or?
Yeah, so, I mean, a little bit of history here, we used to have the west side of 57 all the way up to Cedar Valley. We had Crystal Springs area, was part of that contract, and when the previous chief went to go have a conversation with them about upping the dollar amount, they just took the space away and said, well, you don't respond to this area now. That's how we're gonna keep the same dollar. They just kept on taking smaller, some more pieces of it. Now, is that right for patient care, is it right for fire response?
No, it's not, but
But that's response, they got that.
is it the same chief?
But,
Is it the same chief that did that previously?
no,
So we've got a new chief.
well, he's been there for a while.
You know what I'm saying?
But
It's
yes,
not
there's a different person there, we have a conversation.
And we're not, I would recommend going up like 10%. In our budget, we had 3%, and that was like $200. So it's just something that's at least a little bit more realistic that we can build into the contract.
It's $108, I think it's average of like $108, $10 every year. At 1.5%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just looking for guidance that
That's
way.
basically what I'm seeing
Yeah.
here is, you know. They're basically proposing that they would pay us $7,400 for next year. At 10, how many calls
Yeah,
total?
about 10 EMS, 10 fire.
So
maybe 20
that's-
calls.
So 20 calls for $7,400.
So we're talking $370 per call.
Yeah. Does that cover your cost?
The other question is,
That's probably the severity of it, I mean, that's
Yeah.
not open any question, we have
Yeah.
a fire like that, but $370 that, oh, that's not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it makes sense to up it to at least the rate of inflation, 3%-ish. If we set it at 3%, which is slightly above the rate of bird inflation. At least that keeps us from draining any more money from this contract.
And then it also establishes the precedence of the next contract will be 3%.
Right.
What do you think?
And it might be worthwhile tracking costs and the calls and so forth a little bit more diligently
Yeah.
in order to make an argument for, and make an argument for, we don't need it quite as much. Sometimes we do need to have more of a raise. It's not that we don't wanna do this, they're our neighbors and they live with us. But we need to be able to afford what we're helping them with. I think that
Is 3 enough? I know it's not,
I mean,
You know, and
It's
I'm
not a
I'm
lot.
not saying that we need to go over 10%, but I agree with Chris is. They do cost inflation at least, right?
Yeah.
Just
and that's
be realistic.
usually 3 to 4
Yeah.
lately. So that's why I was wondering if 3's better, but is it quite enough? 3.5, 4 might
Do
be
we
a little
do-
more.
5% the first year, play catch up the last couple contracts, and then 3% for the next, I don't know. I don't know if they would be open.
Again, even at 1%, I mean, we're looking at, the first round, we're looking at $55 difference. So if you double that, that's $110. That's your 3%.
And is that really enough? Right, that's,
That's not really doing a lot. But I guess there's principle behind it too.
Well, at the same time, it's not doing a lot, but it is setting that precedent as things move forward, and it's not gonna be that painful a change right now. I mean, if we try to jack it 10%, that might be more in line with what we ought to be doing. But,
They're gonna
they're gonna,
freak out at
right,
that. Yeah.
right, so.
And that's why I struggle even at 4.5%, which would be triple, and they're gonna be like, whoa, wait, triple?
if we-
So that's why 3 to 4, I think, is what we're gonna get out of it.
Seems reasonable.
Shoot for 4, negotiate to 3.5.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know how Jason is.
Give us a little negotiation.
Well, Jason's the chief over there, but there's a corporation that makes the decision on this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's gotta go back, you know, it's a conversation we had with him, he's gotta go back to his corporation, request the corporation and say, hey, we don't think of.
I don't know, the whole flat rate thing. Is there a possibility of back charging them for per call? And making more of a contract like? It's a simple
It's-
call,
Yeah,
I mean, it would take a lot of, you know, probably tracking on your end of things. But do we look at it instead of making just a flat fee for the
And that was
year, that we keep a little bit more track of how many hours and,
Well, maybe not even the hours, just the calls, because.
yeah,
Some calls will be short, some calls will be longer. It'll
Yeah,
balance out.
but we still pay our
yeah,
volunteers and those
Right.
hours cost us.
That's true, that is true.
At the end of the year, we can say, okay,
and then looking at,
have this many hours.
looking at what the cost is, plus maybe a mild markup for covering the fee, like a 5% above what we are.
I can tell you that nobody in this area has ever done that,
Well,
but
I mean,
but
it's
don't
just a
discount-
thought,
I don't
because-
discount the possibility of it. Everybody's contracts, subcontracts have always been, this is what this is. And I can tell you that this contract is unique because it's always been a 1.5%.
Yeah.
We used to have the town of Stockville, area up and down Riverview Trail and that whole area, everything south of Meadowlark. That's on this side of the river, we used to cover that, and that was a 5%, 7%, 8%. That was a contract that was $25,000 to us before. Graphic Mo's Central Fire Department took that. And it was.
I mean, maybe we look at it, and
was
go,
equal square miles.
yeah, maybe we look at it and go, okay, we'll take your 1.5%, but we're gonna charge you per call. As well, you know, making sure that we're covering our costs. I don't know how that would work. Because like you said, the barn fire
Yeah.
cost you,
Does. That's
Yeah.
all right, but that's this year, next
Yeah.
year we may not have it.
next year, you might not have that. So it's kind of,
So I think we may, I mean, that's a good guidance for the future, contract, you know, 2029. Keep records over the next few years, and then maybe we can do better on the next contract. I just don't know if we have enough information right now, because we haven't been thinking about it.
So what do you think? Shoot for the 3%-ish, 3.5% this contract, let's start keeping records so we can have more of a discussion with the next contract.
I think that's where I would go.
real apples to apples, if you only paid us $8,000, but it cost us $10,000. Or it cost us $15,000 because we had 4 barn fires that we had to deal with.
Does that provide you with enough to work with?
Yeah, we're just looking for guidance. That way the chief can go back to the other chief and chat. And assuming that we're good and we're all on the same page, then it'll go back for the village board for approval. We'll get to that point. Great.
When is this due?
January 1st.
Yeah.
We've got it.
So we got a minute, not a lot, but is, yeah, this is government.
That's why doing the easier one, just the kind of standard markup.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with it.
Speaking of timing, just so you guys know, and it all depends on, we're still waiting on TID values, and there's something else from the state we're waiting on. So depending on how fast I get that, I might be able to complete the budget book to present at our next meeting, which is October 16th. If not, then that means you guys will be seeing the village board will be seeing it that first meeting in November, and then setting a public hearing for that second meeting in November to approve in order for us to get tax bills out on time, which isn't abnormal. Typically, people get their tax bills about middle of December anyway, so. Just so you know. And I know Michelle likes a quick timeline, but just is what it is.
Right.
Cool.
So we're good on the contract we know where to go. All right.
Thank you.
Next. Correspondence. I didn't see any. Items for future consideration, future budget, I think you just covered it, future consideration. That brings us to motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll
Motion
second.
and a second, all in favor? Aye,
Aye.
we are adjourned.